and have been with the organization since the summer of 2015. So in my world, I'm still relatively new because the amount of awesome stuff that's been going on under Amy Trujillo's great leadership prior to me coming on board definitely has given me a lot to learn since I started. And I am really excited to be presenting to y'all today because I love to tell people about the incredible work that we're doing here in our local community. Just as a quick kind of show of hands so I can gauge where to kind of come at some of this information from. Have any of you heard of the Palouse Land Trust already and have some familiarity with our work? And okay, I think most all of you certainly know, at least in name, what we are. And I'm just going to share with you a little bit more today, a little deeper dive into some of what we do with our work specifically, because I know that there is a lot that that comes in name with our land trust title, but I'm just going to talk a little bit more about what we get up to. And this will pop up here sooner than later. So, so I'm really excited because my team just went up to 3 this week. I was able to hire a third staff member, and that position that he is working in is our conservation projects manager. So that is a really great way for us to be able to meet the demand that we're having in the community with respect to the type of work that we're seeing. And then many of you may already know J.B. Jovanovich Walker. She has been with the organization since 2015 and is kind of the hub of a lot of our communication. So anytime you get any type of email or any of our outreach events that we're coordinating out of Idler's Rest, that's kind of falls into Jamie's queue. And my job as the executive director is really not only to just come out in the community and talk with folks like you about what we're getting up to, but I work a lot with our volunteer board of directors. So we have a 12-member board of individuals that essentially set the pace and the tone for our organization about what areas we work in specifically. And I'll talk a little bit about, here we go, finally we're up and running, a little bit more about our board and some of those roles that they play in that function. So I'm just going to kind of give you a little just tour and debrief of the work that we do. So again, I'm really appreciative to be here. And I'm going to just mostly try to stick with photos and want to make this as engaging as possible. I don't necessarily need this to be a one-way communication. I know many of you are familiar with our work, and if you want to dive into questions that maybe ask me a little bit more specifics, I'm super happy to do that as well. So we'll just kind of jump right in. So I thought I would just start out with the mission of our organization, because this really defines what sets us apart from other local nonprofits and other entities doing conservation work in the community. So we are really focused on protecting open space and working with private landowners on a voluntary basis. And we use a really important tool that I'll talk a little bit more about today that really is at the heart of our work. But what we do is really focused on the Palouse region. And I know that many of you are familiar with the areas that we work in, but specifically we cover 7 counties in north central Idaho, Latah County being kind of the core of our service area, largely because the members of our board of directors have always been kind of local folks in driving some of the work that we do, and also because the population center is here. But we go all the way up to Shoshone County, which is basically on the Montana-Idaho border, up on the I-90 corridor, and then all the way down to Idaho County, so down about to Brighams country. So we have just this huge service area. And then we also serve Latah County over on the Washington side. So we have a pretty big region that we cover. The bulk of what we do is, however, kind of right in the core of the Palouse region. And the two kind of primary watersheds that we work in are the Palouse River watershed and the Clearwater River watershed. So I'll highlight just a few of our projects as I go along here, but just a little bit more about us. We're actually going into our 25th year, so we're excited to be celebrating 25 years of working locally with landowner-led conservation. And so we were started as an all-volunteer organization led by a few folks in the community who found that there was kind of a missing element here with respect to land protection. So we were founded by John Norton, and several other community members kind of came together, formed a nonprofit organization and incorporated us. And then just to kind of show a little bit of our history, we had our first full-time executive director, I should say part-time executive director, Amy Trujillo, in 2011, and then we went to a just growing staff along that trajectory. About 20 years after establishment, we were able to kind of expand our staff, and then we shrunk a little, and we're kind of getting back up to that a little bit more. So, as I mentioned, we have a 12-member board of directors. We try to have enough diversity from the community so that it shows kind of representation from the broad segments in which we serve. So we have most of our representation is from Latah County, but we have 2 Whitman County members. We're made up of kind of a whole broad range of board members, ranging from landowners and practitioners to people who have a lot of conservation biology knowledge and emphasis area in their expertise. We also have people who know a lot about nonprofit organizations and have worked a lot in the nonprofit world, so they help with guiding our governance. And the board essentially functions in 4 different areas. We've got committees that represent finance, and then development or fundraising, lands transactions, everything that happens in terms of acquiring and protecting lands, and then a governance committee. So we've got a really, really wonderful, powerful board. I invite you to go to our website and just check out who some of those people are. I bet you there's probably 1 degree of separation, as much as that is kind of the norm in our community. Kind of everybody knows everybody. So that local leadership is really important to the work that we do. And we are a not-for-profit organization, so 501c3 charitable, as you guys probably already know. And the kind of core of our work has always been in this realm of voluntary conservation, and we work with a tool called conservation easements. And it's really, really focused on just private property. So we don't necessarily, our realm doesn't ever span into state-owned lands or federally owned lands. We just work exclusively with private landowners. And when we talk about voluntary conservation, really just it's farmers or ranchers or landowners coming to us and asking for ways that they can explore tools that help with permanent protection on their property. And we use this legal tool called a conservation easement. And I'll just get into a little bit more of examples of conservation easements and kind of talk through the specifics, because it'll make a little bit more sense in a context. We are part of kind of a large national network. We've got a parent organization that's called the Land Trust Alliance. And in 2015, we went through a national accreditation process. And that really just sort of helps us hold true to the values of the nature of our work being in a permanent context, because we want to be around forever, and that requires having good governance and solid finances. And so we adhere to a lot of standards and practices that are set by our nationally accrediting organization. So as I mentioned, we're going into our 25th year, and we've got a lot done over the last 25 years, and there's an awful lot that's in the pipeline. So we've conserved just over 2,000 acres so far to date, and those are transactions that have closed, and then there's lots of others that are kind of being explored with landowners. We have conservation easements on 22 privately owned properties, and then the way that we can protect property is by using a legal tool that keeps the land in private hands. That's a conservation easement. Or we can actually own property, which we do. We have 2 preserve properties. Many of you are familiar with the Idler's Rest Nature Preserve out on Moscow Mountain. That's a little 35-acre property that is under our ownership. It actually came to us, it was conveyed to us by the Nature Conservancy about 15 years ago, and they were looking for a local organization to hold on to that ground and keep it forever as a preserve. So that one is one of our gems. And then we also own 62 acres up on Paradise Ridge, and that property is not open to the public. But it's protecting a lot of ecological values. It's a really, really intact native Palouse prairie ecosystem. And many of you may have known Dave Skinner, so it was named in his honor. That he was a very impactful conservationist who really had deep roots in native Palouse prairie and worked really closely with a lot of other entities locally with Palouse prairie protection and conservation. So that is the other property that we own, and then we recently acquired another 40 acres adjacent to that, so now we're up to about 100 acres up on Paradise Ridge. So we can we hold conservation easements where we are enforcing the conservation values on those lands on private property, and then we also own some land as well. So just going to quickly kind of go over the sort of 4 core areas of our work. These are defined by, again, our board of directors kind of helps set the tone and pace. And many of the things that we have done in our past 25 years have really been anchored around this kind of notion of preserving history and heritage through conservation easements on working farms and ranches, and also open space protection. And when we talk about being a not-for-profit in a community, we really are trying to listen to what the community wants from us as an organization. And a lot of what we are kind of moving into, in addition to kind of our traditional role of private land conservation and protection, is also working in this newer era of what we call community conservation. And a lot of that has to do with providing benefits to the community, whether that's through our outreach programs and working with youth education and getting adults out on the land, but also just in this context of health benefits that are provided by having public access and recreation opportunities. So as I talk through some of these queries, you'll see that we are kind of expanding out of some of our traditional focus on just open space protection. So strengthening community vitality, that means to us about making sure that we are going to be a place that is desirable for people to come and live and work and play into the future. Bringing people together, we're really focused on offering engagement opportunities. So if you follow us at all in terms of our outreach and community work, we're doing a lot with respect to increasing wellness opportunities, especially out at our Idler's Rest property, by taking people out and getting them out in those nature spaces. We feel really, we feel really strongly that our work rests on being able to help people understand how the connection to nature and fostering that conservation ethic is going to really be the people that are going to lead this work into the future. So we're certainly trying to make our impacts that way.
How
Yes?
many places are open versus how many